Hi guys, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to Girls Night In. Tonight, as Shelly said, we're doing things a little bit differently because we have Father's Day weekend. So we have a very special guest, Mr. Joe Mantegna. Just to start, I'm sure you guys are on here because you are fans of Joe and you know about Joe, but I just wanted to tell you a little bit about his career. He has starred in over 200 films, multiple television shows, and has even been on Broadway. Joe has certainly earned his place among the stars and received his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2011. Mantegna has starred in films like Godfather 3, guest starred on The Simpsons for 27 seasons as Fat Tony, and recently finished filming Criminal Minds after 13 years of starring as FBI agent David Rossi. And then, of course, you earned a Tony Award for your part in the Pulitzer Prize winning play, Glengarry Glen Ross. Hi, Joe.
How you doing?
I'm good. How you doing? How are you tonight? How's it been?
You know what? I'm good. It would be bad of me to complain because as crazy as the world is right now,
Yeah.
I feel blessed that, my family's good. I'm good. We'll all get through this, but I feel blessed that I'm able to get through with it maybe a little easier than many people. And so I really have no business to complain about my life. Things are okay. Things are very
great. And we're so happy to have you here, especially it's about to be Father's Day weekend and you're such a wonderful father. And so I guess to start, could you tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into the business? I guess from the beginning.
Sure. I mean, and it's funny when they read your bio and they talked about you doing musical theater in Washington. The musical theater was my entry into being an actor, into show business, and it was kind of a strange introduction in a way because there was nothing pointing me toward that lifestyle. In other words, as a child, my parents weren't active in going to the theater. I never went to the theater. I didn't even see a play till I think I was 16 years old. And so there was nothing really to indicate that this might be the world I would enter. But what happened is, right around that age, when I was about 16, so we're talking about in the early 60s, the movie West Side Story had come out. And I saw that movie, and there was something just magical about it. And I have to remember, I'd never seen a live musical play, but here was this movie, and the movie was just so striking to me and so exciting that those were the days when if you wanted to see a movie more than once, you just stayed in the theater. As long as you didn't leave, you could keep watching it. So I probably watched 3 or 4 times in a row. Anyway, I remember distinctly coming to high school one day, and I was probably a sophomore then. They had signs up saying, "What auditions for West Side Story?" And I'm thinking, auditions for West Side Story? What are they talking about? It's a movie. They've already made the movie. I didn't even know it was based on a play and that it existed as a musical play.
Yeah.
So I was told, "Oh, no, it's a play." And that's where the movie came from. So I thought, wow, okay. And I thought, boy, it would be fun. This movie I love so much, that maybe I get a little bit part playing one of these gang guys or something. Mm-hmm. So to cut to the chase, I tried out for the play. I did not get cast, but I walked up on that stage, and at the moment I finished that audition and looked around the room, and there was something, it was like a lightning bolt hit me in the chest, and I thought to myself, I want to do this for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was somewhat shattered when I heard I wasn't cast, because then I was thinking, why am I disappointed that I'm not getting in something that I didn't even know existed like 2 days ago?
Yeah.
And that's when I thought it might be serious. So bottom line, I've never really looked back from that moment. In other words, from that day, the die was cast at 16. Of course, I went and took the drama class at the high school. I had a wonderful high school that I went to. And that was the beginning of the journey. And it's been an over 50-year journey for me since.
That's amazing. What was your first professional gig?
Well, my first professional gig was the play Hair in 1969. Now, I was going to acting school at the time at the Goodman School of Drama in Chicago, which had a 3-year acting program. And so I'd finished my second year. It was the summer before I was going to start my third and final year. and they had the auditions for the play. I mean, thousands of young people auditioned for it. And I kept getting called back, and it was like, okay, well, let's just see what happens with this. But now I get to the final, they're having the final callbacks. Now, as I get to the final callbacks, while I'm there, I actually run into two people that I'd gone to, had gone to same high school, junior college, were together, that I'd gone to high school, junior college with, that were also from that same program when I was in high school. A young man and a young woman. And which goes to show how good our high school drama department was at the time, because there were three of us in the finals to get into this play. Well, as it turned out, all three of us were cast out of thousands that auditioned. And the woman who was cast is my wife today. We've been married for 45 years this year. She played Jeannie in that production of Hair. I played Burger, not initially the character Burger, but I worked up to that. But so actually she had a lead role before I did in that play. But we had done plays together in district-wide musicals together, so we knew each other. She was younger than I am, but she was in high school and I'd been in junior college. But anyway, it's ironic that we both kind of met in our first, both of us, our first professional production. And we were married a few years later, and she went on to do other things. I mean, I've always been Ricky to her Lucy. I mean, I've stayed in the show business thing. She's started businesses. She had a restaurant for 16 years. She had another company. She's a real entrepreneur and a great mom to our two daughters. But that's where it's professionally. That's where it started. To play Hair, 1969. We wound up doing it for about a year and a half in Chicago, and then we did a national tour for a while as well.
Awesome. That's a great show.
Yeah, and I thought musicals were actually going to be what I was going to be doing, because when Hair closed, shortly thereafter I was casted to play Godspell, and I played Judas in Godspell for about a year. And then sometime after that, I did the play Working on Broadway, Studs Terkel, based on his book. In fact, I have 2 songs on that album written by James Taylor that I did. So I kind of early in my career always thought, well, maybe I'm gonna be that musical comedy guy. Could hopefully have like Jim Dale or an actor like that, and have a musical comedy career. The best laid plans sometimes go a different way, and that which is fine. You take the path that's open to you, and it turns out my career took another turn due to a lot of reasons. Partly when I'm meeting the writer David Mamet, who kind of helped steer me on a whole other direction with my career.
That's great. Do you ever miss musical theater?
I miss it when I see it and I enjoy it. I mean, Patti LuPone is one of our dearest friends. She's like a sister to me. And of course, she's like the queen of musical theater. And she was in Working with me, that play Working. So we both started early on. But even she says, it's tough doing 8 shows a week, at this point in our lives. So I still enjoy it when I see it. One of my dearest friends was in Greece and is in the movie Grease, my friend Mike Tucci. So, I mean, I still have if the right project came along, I wouldn't discount it, but it would have to be, again, I'd have to think about, 8 shows a week, Broadway, we'll see. But I'm glad I'm glad I had the time that I did.
That's great. I know that someone asked in the chat, what's your favorite, but you've done so much in regards to theater. You've written, you've directed episodes of Criminal Minds as well. Do you have a favorite? Is that even possible to pick one?
No, it is impossible, because I feel very blessed that I've been able to have the career I've had, which has been varied in the sense that I did theater. I remember when I won the Tony Award in '84, I had been working professionally since '69 at that point. So I remember when one of the interviewers after the event that night said, well, what's it like to win a Tony Award? I said, wow, it's like winning the lottery, but I've been buying tickets for 15 years. So in other words, you lay a lot of groundwork in there. So I did primarily theater for about 15 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, I segued into film and television, mainly due to the fact of my success on Broadway at that time, which kind of opened up a lot of doors. But I've loved it all. I've loved, it didn't matter what the medium was. If I had to pick 10 of my favorite things, maybe I could come up with 10 things, but everything you do, I mean, I feel very lucky to have a profession that a lot of people dream of doing, and I get it. You know what I mean? Like there's an old saying that says the best occupations in the world are to be either a rock musician, a professional athlete, an astronaut, or an actor. But the actor was the best because you could play the other three. And there's something to that. So for me to say what's my favorite, I don't know. I've had a lot. You know, and often it's the last thing you've done. You know, you say to yourself, "Oh God, I really love doing that. That was great."
What was it like closing a show like Criminal Minds after so many seasons? The show ended in February, right?
Yeah, we ended after 15 seasons. I did 13 and change of them. I came in early in season 3. It was very bittersweet, obviously, because we've gotten very, very close, especially the last 8 of us that were there kind of had spent the last few years together. But again, this is a transitory business. I mean, and I've known that forever. In other words, it all comes to an end, usually a lot quicker. The only ongoing role I've had is I'm still doing Fat Tony on The Simpsons.
That's
And this
amazing.
is, I think, my 30th year. In fact, I do a virtual read through of the new script tomorrow. Because we all get together and have a group, you know, read through. So this will be my 30th, I think my 30th or 31st year doing Fat Tony. But normally things come to, you know, movies, even TV shows come to ends much quicker and plays. But I feel lucky that Criminal Minds lasted as long as it did. 15 seasons were in rarefied air. So I have no complaints about that. And like I said, I'm very grateful that it was as successful as it was.
Right. Regina asked, "Who's your inspiration for Fat Tony on The Simpsons?"
Well, I'll tell you where the inspiration came you know, first of all, Godfather 3 had just come out when I was offered that role. I think that had something to do with it. In other words, the movie came out at Christmas of, I think it was 1990. And so it was 1991 when they approached me early. In other words, the movie was probably still out, Godfather 3. And here I was playing the you know, the gangster, the bad guy in The Godfather. So they figured, well, Joe Mantegna maybe be a good choice to play the new bad guy in The Simpsons. So they call me up. I read the script. The show had only been on a couple of years. I read it. I thought, this is cute. This is funny. This is great writing. I'll do it, of course. Thinking it's going to be a one-shot deal.
Yeah.
Well, I was very close to an uncle of mine, one of my mother's brothers, because my father passed away when I was fairly young. So my uncles were very instrumental in being role models for me in my life. And especially this one uncle, my Uncle Willie. And my Uncle Willie talked like this. This is the kind of voice that he had. Because he had smoked a little too much in his youth. And so they damaged his throat. And so that's the way he talked. So here I was about to do Fat Tony. Nobody had given me any instructions as to maybe how to do it or whatever. But what I thought to myself is, I don't want to do it like Joey Zaza in Godfather 3. The last thing I want to do is make the cartoon version of this character that I've got currently playing in movie theaters all over the world. It'd be kind of silly. So I thought to myself, well, let me try doing Uncle Willie with this voice. So I start doing the voice saying, you know, whatever the first lines were of that first episode, you know, like, yeah, how are you, Bart? You know, I'm Tony, whatever. Nobody said anything. Nobody said, what are you doing? Or stop. So I thought, okay, maybe they must like it. Well, that was it. Next thing I know, you know, I did it. They called me a few weeks later and said, you know, we really like the character. Would you do it again? I said, hell yes, I'll do it again. I love it. And that yes, I'll do it again has turned into a 30-year role for me. And
Right.
so God bless my Uncle Willie lived into his early 90s, and my mother lived to be 101. So it's a nice testament to my relatives and to my Uncle Willie with that one.
Was your mom a fan of the theater or your career?
What's kind of funny and good is I'm not, up to when my mother passed away at 101, I never was quite sure if she really knew what I did for a living, which is just fine.
Yeah.
Because in fact, at her funeral, I have a brother who's very close to, who's 8 years older than I am. And my brother got up to speak first at her funeral. And one of the things he got up to say, when he said in his eulogy, he says, I don't think my brother Joey knows this. He says, but when he got the TV series Criminal Minds, our mother called my brother And my brother says, yeah, Mom, what is it? She goes, I'm worried about Joey. And my brother says, what do you mean you're worried about Joey? And she says, he's only working an hour a week. Because she had been used to hearing that I was in a movie here, or done this here, or in plays here.
Yeah.
Now she hears I'm on this TV series and I'm on an hour a week. This has her concerned. And so my brother has to tell her, no, it's okay, Mom. I think Joey's doing just fine with that hour, and don't worry about it. So I think it's a good thing. I think I've always felt that that kind of grounded me somewhat, in the sense that, look, I've been, again, very fortunate to do what I've done, but I don't feel any different. When I working on that TV show, Criminal Minds, I had all the same respect I had for the extras, for the makeup, for the hair, for the props, for the drivers, for the grips. I mean, it's it's a communal effort. Everybody has to, do what they need to do their job to make something successful. So I just feel, I just have the public job. I have the face part of it that is out there that the public sees. But if my mom didn't really quite understand what I did for a living, who am I to say, oh yeah, look at me? I don't know.
What was the day on set like for
What was
Criminal?
a day on the set like?
Yeah.
It was very counterpoint to the subject matter. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
And I think I found that to be typical. Usually, the more serious the subject matter and dark and grim it is, the more levity and light off-camera stuff is. And you got to remember, you're off camera most of the time. In other words, we would spend 8 days to shoot an episode, to shoot 44 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that time not saying roll camera and cut. So it was a wonderful ensemble, great people. To this day, they're my dearest friends. I mean, just every single one of them, lovely. It's even the ones that came and gone, and we went through some cast changes. I mean, I was the new guy, 13 years ago. Um, but a day on the set was just like really, like anybody who's at a job that they enjoy and like the people that they're working with. It's no different.
Yeah.
It really isn't. And we maintain these friendships, and we do text threads all the time, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from them. Usually someone will start it, and then all of us will jump on
Right.
almost every day. So that was very nice.
That's great. So one of your daughters is an actress as well, and
Yes, I
she
have
was
two.
on episodes of Criminal Minds.
Yeah, as it turned out, and this was really not, and I really had nothing to do with that, because even in her whole career, I've never been the kind of parent like, hey, look, wow, you ought to get into show business. It was not, it's like, no, look,
Yeah.
it's such a tough business anyway. If you really want this, you got to go get it. But she really had a natural talent for it, because she got cast in the movie Unaccompanied Minors when she was like 15 or something. She just went and auditioned and got it. It was, Paul Feig directed. It was a big movie about kids stranded in an airport. Anyway, she got all that stuff on her own. And then they came to me once I was on Criminal Minds, and they said, we're doing this episode and we need this character. It's supposed to be the daughter of a hitman. So in other words, she's a tough girl. And we've seen some of the stuff your daughter's done. We think she'd be great in a part. Would you mind if we cast her? I said, well, of course I'm not going to mind. I said, she's an actress. If you want to cast her, cast her. So they did. And it was a lot of fun for me to work with her, even though I'm playing the good guy and she's not that's necessarily a positive role model. But what made it even more interesting is they liked the way the episode came out and her character. So that 10 years later, our showrunner came to me and said, we got an idea. We want to bring your daughter's character back to see what happens to a character like that 10 years later. In other words, she was playing a girl who was 17, who was the daughter of a hitman. What happens to a daughter of a hitman who's tough already? And in that first episode was basically telling her father, when he's got this one guy cornered, kill him, daddy, kill him, kill him. She's got that, because she's like father, like daughter.
Yeah.
So then she came back and did a whole arc 10 years later on our show. And now we see her as an adult and what she became. So I'm very proud of her. And she sings, she plays instruments. She's very multi-talented. But yet the bottom line is she's a great girl. That's all that matters. And then my other daughter, I have a daughter with autism, who's my older daughter, and who's wonderful as well. And what's great is my younger daughter Gia realized that she has a responsibility in a way to kind of be, even though she's younger, has to be the big sister to her sister. Because while my other daughter's 33, in many ways, she's still young, like a young girl. She still would like to go to Disneyland and meet the princesses and all that.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other dynamic. But that's, yeah, but, you know, but that's fine. It makes you realize that um, you don't know what cards you're going to get dealt to in life, and it doesn't matter what your station in life is, or this, that, and the other. But it's okay. You know, you play the cards you're dealt, and I'm perfectly content, happy, and thrilled to have the deck I have.
Yeah. Someone asked in the chat, Kathy said, as a mother of a 13-year-old son who has autism, can you give any advice on dealing with the current situations in regard to COVID-19, and especially considering the guidelines coming up for the fall?
Well, I mean, in a way, if you are a parent of a special needs child like that, you're already kind of ahead of the game because you already know what it's like to maintain a somewhat protected environment. I mean, I don't know specifically what her situation is with her son, but I mean, for us, it's actually worked out okay because our daughter, um, she will thrive in whatever the situation may be. I mean, one thing we learned early on is that the world wasn't going to adapt to her. She was going to have to adapt to the world. So from the time she was diagnosed at 2.5 years old, we realized the beat has to go on, and she's gonna have to learn to function in it. So we did a lot of. They've traveled all over the world with us, me, my wife, and I. We always traveled in a group. I would get jobs offers to do things, and I would, even if it was, let's say, a week in Moscow, I'd say, okay, but they all got to go. They said, well, you're only going to be gone for a week. I says, it doesn't matter. I says, I'll take less money, but they all got to go. I'm not going alone. I'm not, you know, I don't care if it's a week, 4 days, 1 day. Everybody goes. That's the way I travel. And that's what we did. And in retrospect, I'm so glad we did because that made it, you learn from that. And so what I would say to this woman is it's just that you do what you need to do. And if you have to change things, like one thing we learned was in the schooling aspect. My daughter was in special ed for a long time. But then when I did these movies in Canada, I found out that they had a different system, that they didn't have a special ed. That, like, if your child has a certain special needs, they still go to a regular class. They just do what they need to do to have that kid have what they need within that class. And then you talk to the children themselves and let them know, hey, we've got a new student in the class. She's got this condition called autism, so she may talk to herself, or she may walk to the blackboard and draw, or she may do these things. And if you incorporate the children into that and let them know that, then you've eliminated that whole thing of who's that weirdo, or what's going on here. And so inclusion was very important for us. And we ran into this beautiful woman in Chicago when I was doing a movie there that really introduced us to that. She was the one that changed our lives, telling us, you should demand that. Don't accept the fact that she should go into just a special class. If you need to do that, you need to do that. I get that. But you try to push the envelope when you can. So my advice is you just kind of have to see what's going on, what your options are, but just know that the more you can have your child adapt to the world as it is, you know, the better off you are. These are obviously crazy times we're in right now with the COVID thing. But you get closer as a family, just being hunkered down. I know it's kind of happened for us that way, and that's okay.
That's great. Another question from Gretchen. Greetings from Chicago. What has been the secret to your marriage, standing not only the test of time, but the Hollywood test of time?
Yeah, I often hear that. I joke. I used to tell my wife, I said, I think it was us and Bob and Dolores Hope. Maybe hold the records, but I don't know. One analogy I've used is that sometimes you have to think of it that you're on a roller coaster, and there are going to be times in a roller coaster that are very scary, and you think, I don't know if I can take this. This is so scary, but yet, so you have an option. If you're so scared, you let go and you fly out of the roller coaster, and then what happens is you land in another roller coaster, or whatever. Or you hang on during the tough parts, during the scary part, and then all of a sudden, whoa, and it smooths out a little, and you realize, wow, I'm really enjoying this. And so, I mean, I've always been a believer of more that the yin and yang kind of theory, that look, not everything is going to be 100% perfect all the time. But if the reason you went into it initially were good and important and strong, then, you know, just as much as you want to embrace and enjoy the good times, sometimes you have to like hunker down and say to yourself, okay, we're going through a bad patch here. Let's get through this. And you know, and then you find out that whole thing of like the weld is stronger than the initial break. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So beyond that, I don't know what the secret is. I mean, I think I've been very fortunate to have a woman that I've always said is much stronger than I am, and she really does compliment me that way, because I mean, she sometimes she would say something like, you know, it's tough, and I get it. It's tough sometimes to walk in the shadow of somebody who the public is so well known. But what I've often said is, she doesn't walk in the shadow. She actually provides the light, you know, and that's the truth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, just so you know, we have several people on here in education who either teach now or have taught children with autism, and everyone's commenting on their appreciation for you and sharing some personal stories.
Well, I thought it was important for me to even early on, you know, because when she was first diagnosed, not a lot of people were coming out and talking about it. She was diagnosed, like I said, I think it was 1989, in
Hmm.
1990, and there wasn't a lot going on. And then People Magazine, I remember that's what happened, is they called me about Godfather 3. The movie was going to open. It was obviously a big deal. And somehow they had heard I had a daughter with autism. And so in the interview, it was all about me as an actor. But all of a sudden the question came up. So, by the way, what's it like to have a daughter on the autism spectrum? And now at that point, very few celebrities that I at least knew of had brought that up, or even though I knew many who had, never talked about it. But that's when I thought to myself, okay, I have a choice here. I either say, well, you know what, I'd rather not talk about this, or just, you know, let it slide, or I address it. But then I thought to myself, if I don't address it, then I'm negating my daughter's existence in a way. I'm basically trying to hide her under a pillow or something, you know, off to the side. And at that moment, when I thought to myself, yeah, okay, yeah, we can talk about it, and I did. And then I wondered about it after a while. And then an article came out, and then I got a letter. I got a letter sent to me from a woman a week or so later after the magazine came out. And in the letter, she said, I was so moved and grateful to see that you told your story, because I was almost under the impression that, you know, it doesn't happen to people like you, and that, you know, this is, you know, made her feel like, okay, this is not something that's just confined to us, whoever the us is. So from that point on, I realized, no, this is, it's important to get it out. If it's helpful to even just one other person, then it was worth it. Why not? You know.
Yeah. Is Mia still involved in inclusion films?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you even brought that up, because I just did a thing for Inclusion Films just a couple days ago, a Zoom thing with their class in Bakersfield. Yeah, she had a thing called Mia's Makeup Corner for them for a long time. She wound up being involved with them even longer than the program was. You know, it started by Joey Travolta, it was John Travolta's brother, a wonderful guy, and then and all the people that attached to it are just a wonderful group of people. So yeah, so we're still, you know, we still have friends there. We're close to there. They I don't know if they still have their classes, or they may in Los Angeles. I don't think they do that. I know they have them all over the country, and in Bakersfield, I think maybe the closest one here now. But yeah, we just did a thing. Mia and I both got on camera with them and talked to some of the students, and then we'll drive up to Bakersfield sometime once we can,
Yeah,
and take a visit as well.
that's great. Someone wants to know, what will your next acting acting endeavor be when the show ends?
You know what? I'm glad they brought that up, because ironically, the next thing I'm doing, and this was just, if you Google it, you'll probably see it. You'll get the information, because it just came out in Variety, I think, yesterday. Jason Katims, who's the guy who created Parenthood and Friday Night Lights, one of the main guys on that. He wrote a show based on an Israeli show called On the Spectrum. Jason has a 23-year-old son who's on the autism spectrum. So he created a show based on this Israeli show about these three young people who are all on the spectrum, who live together. And then they have a regional center person, like a person, kind of through the local government who kind of watches out for them. And Kevin Bacon's and his daughter, Susie, plays that role. And the three actors, two men and a woman, the young people who play the people on the spectrum, really are on the spectrum.
Great.
And I play the father of the lead boy, the oldest, well, not oldest, but just kind of like the lead boy. And I saw the pilot, and it's just so beautiful. And it just got picked up by Amazon. So it's going to be a new show on Amazon. We don't know if the title is going to stay on the spectrum. They talked about maybe that, or maybe Define Normal was a choice to use. But it's such a beautiful show because, like I say, the three main actors really are on the spectrum. And so it's a look into that world. And because it's Amazon, it's not network TV, we're able to really kind of show it like it is. And they don't pull any punches, but it's a lot of humor, a lot of touching, moving things about it. And it's beautifully done. And Jason is such a sensitive, wonderful writer. So I'm just thrilled that that got picked up. Because when they first came to me with it, I looked at it. They were supposed to shoot the whole thing in Chicago. And I'm from Chicago, but I really didn't want to, uprooting the family at this time in my life, it just wasn't in the cards. And so I remember when they called me about it, I said, look, I love this project, but I can't do it. I'm not going to relocate it. I grew up in Chicago, but I don't live there anymore. I said, God bless you. I love this project, but I got to pass. Well, as it turned out, a couple of months later, they called me back and said, you know what? We were able to move it to Los Angeles. So
That's great.
sometimes things work out. So anyway, that's what I'm doing next. And I'm looking forward to when we start that. Obviously, there's no set date yet, start date, because of the industry is just starting to kind of get back on its feet. But I think, according to what I heard, Amazon wants it to be one of their initial kind of things that come out this next season.
Great. Another question from Alexis Watkins. She says, hi, I was thinking of attending the New York Film Academy for an acting for film program and was wondering if you think that would be beneficial.
Well, I mean, I'm not one to kind of blow the horn for any particular one program. In other words, I'm aware of the New York Academy, but there's also a lot of other places as well. So to say what's the right fit, that's really a personal thing. Mm-hmm. So what I would suggest is to her, is to see if they do a thing where they can audit one class at least. In other words, to be able to go there, sit in, and see what they offer. You know what I mean? Because that's the only way to tell. Because there's a variety of kinds of schools out there and classes, from smaller ones to more organized ones. Especially, I don't know where she lives. Is she from in Los Angeles, or did she say, or California? Or?
I don't know. Alexis, if you want to put it in the chat, feel free.
Well, whatever. But all I'm saying is, I think it's important to kind of see if it's a right fit, and do that with a few, if wherever they happen to live, see what the other options are, other schools, other classes, and then you'll know. I mean, I always tell that to people, you'll know once you go in there and you go, wow, I really connect with that teacher.
Yeah.
Or I love the people who are in this group. And that's how you know. There's no other way to say, oh yeah, they're the best for you. This one versus that one.
Post-college, for actors who are maybe just starting out or newer in the business, do you have any advice that you would give that maybe you wish that someone had given you?
To just put it out there. I mean, I never went to a regular college. I went 2 years to junior college. Well, partly because we didn't have the money. My father was disabled most of his life. His wife passed away young. My mother worked at Sears Roebuck wrapping packages in the warehouse for 25 years. So going to like a university or college was never in the cards for me. So when I graduated high school, public school, I took out a government loan because there was available back then. And for the 2 years that I went to junior college and acting school, I lived off these government loans that I took. But what I did is I took the classes. In other words, I did junior college and did theater classes and did it. And then I went to acting school for the 2 years, as I said, prior to getting cast in Hair, did it. So the thing to do is just try to get the experience and go out and do it. So depending where you live and where you are, whether it's community theater, whether it's academic theater in a post-college environment, whether it's putting together your own group. Nowadays, it's actually easier. I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, you couldn't make your own movies unless you had an uncle who maybe owned the movie theater or had a projector or something, or a film. Nowadays, people make movies on their phones,
Yeah.
and some of them actually, professional quality. So there's a lot of, I was with a theater company in Chicago for 5 years, organic theater back in the 70s. So there's a lot of different avenues. So I would just say there's no magic phone number. There's no magic, thing to do, or this is the right thing to do. But the thing is to just don't expect to sit by a phone and maybe get somebody think, oh, if I get an agent, then they'll just call me and offer me jobs, and that's how I'm successful. It doesn't work that way. You just got to kind of do it. If you're a painter, you got to go paint. If you're a musician, play music. If you're an actor, go act. However, where you do it.
Right. Another question from Nicole in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Wants to know, did you find it difficult to leave the heaviness of the material on Criminal Minds in the studio and not carry the weight home with you?
That's a very good question. You know what? I never carried the weight home with me. And I know that's something, and I've often was asked that question, like, oh, how do you do a show like that? Isn't it weird? And I know there have been other people commenting how, oh, I can't watch it, which I get it. They would TiVo it and then watch it in the morning. And they would say, how do you do that? Isn't it just destructive? And my answer always was no, because out of respect for the real men and women who do that job. I've actually was able to go to Quantico a few times, the real place where the FBI headquarters are in Virginia. And I've spent time with them, and I have some close friends that are former and current FBI. And here I am on a TV show portraying what they have to do for a living. Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of guy am I if I say, oh man, it freaks me out to be on a show because it's so grim, when I do a scene and a guy is laying there with like a lead pipe going through his head, when they say cut, he takes it off and goes and gets a sandwich and, wipes the fake blood off and everybody goes home. But yet that might be based on a real incident where the real FBI guy had, or woman, whatever it may be, had to confront that and deal with that, which is what they do every day. So I thought we did a pretty good job of portraying, because I knew the FBI pretty much for the most part liked our show because we didn't cut corners. I always thought it would be wrong of us to like tone it down or to make it seem more like, well, we're going to soften this up, because that's not what it's like. So, I mean, yes, it was disturbing at times, but I never brought it home with me because I always thought, how lucky am I that I'm just portraying the pretend version of what these men and women really do. So no, and I have nothing but admiration for people who do that. And that's why our first responders and people like that, it's not an easy job. And sometimes, we have to take that into consideration.
Yeah. Another question. How does one begin doing voiceover work? I've taken classes and have a demo. Have any advice for voiceover actors?
Again, I don't know if there's a secret to that. I mean, I never pursued it like per se in the sense of, oh, I think I'll do this. But because of my career and of what I wound up doing, I got approached, and one thing led to another. I was the voice of Mercedes-Benz for like 5 years at one time, only because I think they wanted an urban. Nobody ever mistook me for like a Swedish sea captain type. I mean, so if they wanted an urban sounding guy, I sometimes would get the call. But I have a sister-in-law who, lives in the Chicago area, who's wonderful, has kind of did it on her own because she's got a very unique voice. She put together demo tapes, for herself, put herself out there. And nowadays, it's the landscape is so big, you're almost easier now than it used to be because a lot of stuff is non-union. Again, it's just a matter of how you apply yourself. In other words, if a person really feels they can benefit or have something to offer as a voice, actor or actress, they should just put together all the tapes or as much as they can, find out the best way to do that, and then just, with the internet, there's, it's not a world I know that, the voice world like that. Because like I said, I was doing it at a whole other time mostly. But there are avenues out there to pursue. So that's just, there's no secret formula to do that. I think it's just keep putting it out there. And if you've got something unique, somebody will pick up on it.
How is voiceover acting different from what you're doing on film?
Not a lot different, except you could show up in your pajamas instead of, wearing a costume and makeup and all that.
Kind of
But
like Zoom.
yeah, exactly.
I could be wearing pajamas.
Straighten up a little bit though for here today.
Yeah.
I'm
Just
starting to go look at, due to COVID, I'm starting to look like Mark Twain a little bit here. I got a haircut coming up, but I'm forgetting exactly what the question was now.
just how is acting
Oh, acting different. That's
not
right.
on film
Well,
different?
it isn't, and I often find myself when I'm in front of the microphone doing it that I start, you can't help but kind of get into it, the character, and so you start to physicalize it a little bit because it's just, I'm Italian anyway. I talk with my hands, so so it's not a lot different. It really is that you're using the same chops. Just that you know, you're doing it into a microphone instead of doing it in front of a camera or in front of an audience.
Yeah, great. Somebody said Francine wanted you to know her husband was a comedian. Oh no, let me see one way. But made an attempt for a bit part in The Godfather 3 and told me that he had the honor to have lunch with you and said you are a very humble man and a strong family man. And
Oh, well, that's sweet. That's great.
Someone wants to know, how does someone get an agent for the first time?
Like, that's another thing that's tricky in the sense of people often think of, oh, all I need is an agent, and then it'll happen for me. I still don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I think what you basically have to do is you can't put the cart in front of the horse. In other words, for an agent to take an interest in you, you kind of have to have something for them to take an interest in. Right. Now, there used to be a time, I mean, I'm talking 40 years ago, you could go into an agency and do a scene for them or whatever. And maybe if they liked what they saw, they might represent you. But still, the best way is to have something that acts as a showcase for yourself, whether it's on film, a reel you made for yourself, which should be short, just even if 2-3 minutes. Or if you're in a play and you can get some agents to come see it, they have showcase things. Outside of that, I don't know. There is no other way to do it. In other words, you kind of, it's a little easier if you're not even, I shouldn't even say that, because even if you're a painter or a musician, you still have to put your product in front of the people who make a difference in order for them to say, oh yeah, I like what you're doing, so I'll represent you. It's no different. So I would just say to get an agent is you just have to kind of, the best way possible, find a way to showcase what you do, and then try to reach, the people who can hire, act as your representative to see you. And there's all kinds of agents. You don't have to start at the very top. I had one agent for many, many years who was like a tiny little agent, but it didn't matter that he wasn't a huge agency. It just depends. If they believe in you, somebody who likes you or says, hey, I could work with you. I'd work for you. You give it a shot.
Yeah. I want to know what it was like being on SNL.
Well, that was a thrill. I mean, hosting Saturday Night Live, I will say that was one of those dream come true jobs. And what's funny is there was the one skit we did. One of the skits we did was the one they wrote for me, which was Dow Bears, about the Swirsky brothers, Bill and Bob Swirsky, the super fans, and Robert Smitus, who created the skit, he wrote it because he knew I was from Chicago and it was football season. He thought, oh, well, this might be a fun skit. We'll do a thing on Bears fans. Little knowing that when we did it that night, the next day in Chicago, I think they ran that skit on the radio like 24 hours, and it became huge. Then, as it turned out, George Wendt, who was a dear friend of mine, hosted the show about 2 weeks later. So, of course, they brought the skit back, and it made him my brother. So I was Bill Swirsky, he was Bob Swirsky, or vice versa. I even forget who's who. And so then he did it, and again, it was huge. And then he would go, he'd almost fly back every few weeks and do it. And they'd always offered it to me to come in and do it with them. But I was living here in California, and the idea of flying to New York just to do the skit on a Saturday, I couldn't always do that. But I did wind up doing it one more time with George and with Chris Farley and Mike Myers, and it was just great. And actually, they wrote a movie of it, and we were going to make the movie a feature film, but that's when Chris Farley passed away, and he was such a huge part of that initial skit that they just felt in good faith we couldn't do the movie without Chris. So we never made the movie, but we just did one. We did a version of it just recently as for a part of this COVID thing for homeless people in Illinois. It's called Sweet Home Chicago. And I think if you maybe Google Sweet Home Chicago, you may find it. And there's like a 12-minute skit, based on that skit from SNL with myself, George Wendt, and Schmeigel. We recreated. But it was a thrill to work with, like I say, to work back then with Mike Myers and to work with Chris Farley.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It was one Phil Hartman. I got to work with some of the greats from that show. So that was a thrill.
Tasha said it was her favorite skit on SNL in the chat.
Oh, great.
What was your favorite part that you've ever played? Do you have a favorite?
There really isn't. I mean, there's many, I've had such a variety. I love playing David Rossi for 13 seasons on Criminal Minds. I love playing Dean Martin when I did the movie The Rat Pack because I idolized Dean Martin. And so I did so much research on him, and because of it, got to be friends with members of the family, especially Dina Martin, his daughter. So that was a thrill. Working with Coppola, obviously. Working with my friend David Mamet. I did, a couple plays with him. I did Glengarry Glen Ross, which changed my life, that play. Did Speed the Plow on Broadway with Madonna back in 1988 that wow. David wrote. Did many movies with him, including House of Games, Things Change, Homicide, Red Belt, other movies. So, I mean, my career has been very varied. I mean, Baby's Day Out was a lot of fun. Airheads was a lot of fun. It's, sometimes people, I could tell where somebody's coming from when they come up to me. I can almost tell which movie they're going to bring up depending what they're like. Because if it's like an old rocker, I know they're going to bring up Airheads because they're going to go, hey man, Airheads, what you got to play? Because it's a rock and roll movie. And if they're of a certain age, I know it's about Baby's Day Out because they'll say, oh man, when I was 6 years old, that was my favorite movie. And but to try to narrow it down to a role, it's impossible. And sometimes it's even the experience is what you remember. Like I've done a lot of movies in foreign. I've shot in Italy. I've shot in Russia. I've shot in Australia, France, Spain. So sometimes just the experience is so strong, and I remember that. Especially being with my family and being able to experience that. We've traveled the world, and that's been a real blessing.
What's it like playing such an icon like Dean Martin? I know you've done a few biographical films.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I played Fidel Castro in a movie called My Little Assassin with Gabrielle Anwar, which was also, I did a lot of research on that to play that role. But to play Dean Martin, it was daunting. I mean, I was scared at first because I thought to myself, who am I to play Dean Martin? Because I idolized him so much. But then I thought, well, they're asking. And if I don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And then I'm going to kick myself for not giving it a shot. So I really, really worked on it. And I have to say, I mean, for what it's worth, it's the only role that I've done where I got nominated for both the Golden Globe and an Emmy for it. So which it only made me feel good in the sense that, okay, at least maybe I was able to somewhat capture the essence of who this guy was. It can never be him. But that's all I tried to do. There's one little anecdote that goes with that. When I was working on it, and I would interview people who knew him, and like I said, I got to know his family, his daughter, and they were all very supportive. But it was his voice I was not worrying about, but thinking, how do I capture that voice? And then I grew up at a time, which some of the people who are closer to my age may remember, but there was this cereal called Sugar Crisp. And this character, Sugar Crisp, well, you know what that is? That they're delivering my script from The Simpsons. Arlene?
Cool.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say they're delivering my pizza.
No, they're actually, I'm doing that Simpsons tomorrow. Can you get it, honey?
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's the script for The Simpsons, because I do.
It rang though.
It rang it downstairs on the thing. No, it's not yours. Is not connected yet. Okay.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, this is my wife. Heading downstairs. Anyway, so they had the cereal Sugar Crisp, and they had this character, the sugar bear. And the sugar bear talked like this. Oh, can't get over that sugar crisp. Hey, I'm the sugar bear here. And then I realized that's the kind of voice that Dean Martin talked like. He talked like this. So I thought to myself, if I just said, instead of can't get over them sugar crisp, oh, how'd all these people get in my room? Hey, Smokey, how you doing over there? And so whenever I would work, be on a set and I would channel this sugar bear into the voice. That's how I kind of captured the voice of trying to do Dean Martin.
Yeah.
And I've told this story. I remember even at a roast we did for the Friars Club in New York for his daughter Dina, and I told the same story. Of course, she got a kick out of it, so that was one little trick. But I love doing it. And I remember when it ended, Don Cheadle and I and Ray Liotta, we all looked at each other and thought on the last day, do we really have to stop? Can't we just take this on the road?
Yeah.
But it's okay. And like I said, I'm thrilled we were able to do it. I love being able to have played that role.
Wonderful. A few people have mentioned that they really enjoy watching you co-host the Memorial Day concert in Washington, D.C. They were able to, Gail says she was able to attend a few years ago, and God bless you for all that you've done in support of our troops.
Well, that's my hot button. Our military really is my hot button. For 19 years now, I've been doing that concert. This was my 19th year this year. We had to do it, obviously, virtually, Gary Sinise and I. And I'm not a political person. It's got nothing to do with politics. I mean, I have a lot of relatives that were in the military. And that's what I like about it. The fact is, our military is there for us to ensure us the rights we have to live the lives we live and to be political or non-political, or to be a Republican or be a Democrat or a Libertarian or whatever, or what you want to do. But it doesn't come cheap and it doesn't come free. Freedom ain't free. And there are those people who have to defend those rights. And some of them that pay the price for it. And all you have to do is visit our military hospitals or even the cemeteries and realize, I remember I was doing the movie in France, and I was in this little town called Rambouillet, France. We were shooting at the chateau there. It was a beautiful movie, fun comedy. And I was on my way there. And as I pulled into this beautiful, picturesque town, I got my family in the car. I noticed an American flag flying. I'm thinking, this is weird. Why is there an American flag flying in this little French town? And I get closer and I see it's flying, and there's a French flag next to it. And it was a cemetery. And it was a cemetery for those who had died in World War II, who had fought in that area, liberating France. And I'm thinking, looking at all these crosses, thinking underneath every one of them is probably a guy who's most likely not even 20 years old. Never got a chance to do anything, let alone live the life I've lived. So for me, the military is, we all have things we like to embrace and help, and so for me, it really is that, and so it's a privilege to kind of represent them, to our men and women from its inception, from 1776 prior to today, the men and women who have made the choice to, I'm going to pay back a little. This is my service to the country, and for me, I grew up in the Vietnam era. I had a birthday that kept me out of the draft because it was a lottery system, and my birthday was a lucky number. At the time, it didn't even register. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm not going to get called. It was only later when you realize, wow, it could have been me on that wall in Washington, D.C. So,
yeah. So
that's why. So it's very important to me, and like I say, I'm a big supporter of our military.
That's great. We might be getting down to last three questions. We can keep going. We have a few people asked, did you enjoy playing in House of Games as much as I loved it? I watched it 18 times.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. That movie really has become a classic, becomes a cult classic. I hear sometimes in France, they even still run a first run at the movie theaters, like they'll just play it out. It's, I did enjoy it. It was, I've been very lucky to have, David Mamet and I crossed paths in Chicago. He was a struggling playwright back in the early 70s. I was a struggling actor in the early 70s. And we crossed paths. I likened it to probably a guy who back in England, back in the 1500s, he lived down the street from this guy named Bill Shakespeare, who used to write plays, and probably said, hey, Freddie, you'd be good to play this guy Hamlet I wrote. Why don't you come and do this part? Oh, okay, Bill. So it kind of worked that way for me. I mean, I was very lucky to be born in the same. We're 18 days apart in age, David and I. We're still very close. We still talk about doing projects together, and so that was the culmination of of a relationship we'd had for some years prior to doing House of Games, and continues on today. So a lot of it was the luck of the draw. I mean, I'm just so glad that our stars kind of crossed in the sky, and we've hopefully been good for each other that way.
Yeah. Josie wants to know, does your family have input in the roles that you choose at all?
Well, somewhat, but I think they've always, my wife's been great about that way, but understanding that, if I like it, do it. You know what I mean? If I feel it's important, do it. But sure, sometimes we'll discuss things and the benefits of maybe. Sometimes it's also the lifestyle that's involved. In other words, sometimes I get offered more than one thing at the same time, and sometimes it's a matter of making a choice, not even so much on the material, but how it's going to affect our lives, even. And I've had to make choices like that, and I never regret it if I make the choice based on what I think was maybe best for all of us, as opposed to. Like I said, my career's been pretty good. So, I mean, if such and such maybe looks like it's going to, that's going to pay me a lot more money, but this one over here is going to let us stay home more and not be so disruptive. It's never a mistake to kind of go for the thing that at the end of the day, you say, you know what, I'm glad I went that way with it, hopefully.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's certainly a consideration and input there.
Colleen wants to know, my son is also 33. How are you planning for your daughter's future? I know you mentioned that your younger daughter will be involved.
Well, she can't help but be involved, but yet on the other hand, we don't expect her to be her sister's caretaker or you know what I mean? But yet she knows there's a responsibility there, and it's fine. She accepts that, and it's great. So again, it depends on the particular situation. I don't know if her child has siblings or not or whatever. Regardless of that, you just do what you can. I mean, we're my wife and I are conscious of it every day of how are we planning things for our daughter's life, beyond when, we're able to, or when we're not around. But you do the best you can, and that's all I can say. For every family, it's a different thing. But the main thing is to just be involved, be attentive, be lead the parade if you're at the front of it, and do what you can do. I'll probably have to take one more because I can hear starting to just go crazy, the whole thing.
It's fine. Everyone has lives. Last question. Regina asked, was there a role that you turned down that you later wished you had done?
There's been a few that I thought to myself, oh, wow, I could have done this and I could have done that. Mm-hmm. But you know what? What I've come to realize is when I turned those things down, at the time, there was a good reason for that. Mm-hmm. And in other words, and so I've had to say to myself, oh man, because maybe something you turned down and all of a sudden you realized, became such and such and was very successful. But then I realized, but wait a minute, why did I turn it down in the first place? And then if I backtrack, I say to myself, no, that was the reason. And at that time, that was a good reason because I really needed for that reason. So 2020, hindsight, it's 2020, that whole thing of, or being a Monday night quarterback is that same thing of like, if you always knew everything was going to be great and successful, of course, you'd always make those choices. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. But as long as you go in with a clear head and making your decisions as hopefully as smart as you can't regret the ones that maybe you say, oh, well, that one got away. That's okay. It wasn't meant to be. I believe in that. Sometimes things just aren't meant to be. And it's rather than dwell on them or try to think about, well, there was that. Doesn't matter. Didn't happen. It's okay.
Yeah. So many people are thanking you in the comments. They had an amazing time. People thank you. It was really cool. Great fundraiser.
Well, I'm flattered to be part of it. I mean, this is very nice. I love this concept and to be included on this Father's Day week, being a father.
Yeah.
And with all these wonderful women out there, it was my pleasure, really my honor. And I hope it was enjoyable for everybody.